we are now about to begin the first session on the life of Atisa Dipankara. The moderator for this session is Venerable Professor Kaveri Gill. May I invite the moderator and the panelists to please take their place at the dais. Venerable Geshe Lhakdor, Director, Library of Tibetan Works and Archives. Venerable Dr. Pooja Dabral of Nalanda University. And Venerable Geshe Thabkhe of the Sera Monastery. I welcome our distinguished panelists. Allow me to briefly introduce our moderator. Venerable Professor Kaveri Gill is a faculty member at the Center for Excellence in Himalayan Studies, Shiv Nadar University. Trained as a development economist, she studied and later lectured at the University of Cambridge, UK, specializing in political economy and development theory. Over the past decade, she has systematically studied Nalanda philosophy at Tibet House, New Delhi, integrating classical Buddhist thought with contemporary economic and ethical inquiry. Her interdisciplinary research bridges political economy, ethics, and contemplative studies, fostering dialogue between modern scholarship and ancient wisdom to explore compassion, consciousness, and holistic development in the Himalayan and global contexts. Professor Kaveri Gill, the panel and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I would like to begin by felicitating the organizers of this amazing conference, not least the relics from Zongza Chodin Monastery and all the way from Bangladesh. That alone is worth spending 2 days here and maybe 10 days circumambulating. It's a rare, rare chance. And in gratitude to His Holiness and everyone who has worked so hard to make this possible. So we are gathered here. So today this panel is on the life of this great master, Venerable Atisa. At 18 months in the temple of Vikrampur in Munchiganj in Bangladesh, when they take him to a temple, he looks on the audience with compassion and he says, if only they were like me, wealthy parents, dominion and dazzling merits, heir to a king, a powerful prince, may all be sustained by holy dharma. And then he prayed, I have gained the optimum human rebirth with faultless senses that I have beheld the three jewels. May I always respectfully touch the three jewels to the crown of my head. From today, may they be my refuge. May I never be bound by a householder's duties. May I be endowed with dharma in the midst of the Sangha. Without any pride, may I make offerings to the three jewels. May I look on all beings with compassion. So, as somebody mentioned in the morning, speaking of the three jewels and refuge and bodhicitta, as also was the message of His Holiness, is something that is particularly associated with Jovoje Palden Atisa. At this age, already, of course, suggests lifetimes of practice. But as much as they uncommon biographies, I find the common biographies of these great beings extraordinarily inspiring, because it suggests that there is hope for all of us to tread the same path. And here I want to mention in his 72 years of a life that we will hear more from our stupendous panel, the man-born Prince Chandragarbha, who later became the most venerable Master Atisa achieved. And inter alia, because I cannot list all his achievements, these 2 days are to discuss that. The first is the emphasis on the awakening mind of bodhicitta. He is the confluence lineage holder of both methods of sevenfold cause and effect and the method of equalizing, exchanging at self and others. He is, as Dasho Karma Ura and everybody has mentioned in the morning panel, the author of The Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, Bodhi Pad Pradeep, that synthesizes all the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha into a cogent pith path including everything required for both personal liberation seekers, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, as well as Bodhisattva aspirants of full Buddhahood. Third, illustrating the importance of monastic Sangha at a time of great degeneration in Tibet. Look at the courage. Traveled far and wide to both learn and benefit beings, the international trade routes and Buddhist maritime Asia of the Pala dynasty of Bihar and Bengal are traversed by him in this quest at advanced ages, illustrating his Buddha-like deeds for the sake of other sentient beings. Fourth, he epitomized the sacredness of the teacher-disciple relationship, both in his relationship with his own 157 teachers and his relationship to his own Thabkhe heart disciple, Drontom Galvi Jugne, and all the others who later went on to found the great Kadamba school. Most importantly, he also was so very open-minded and beyond all partisanship in thought and bias, whether it was towards vows or tenets that he held. And I really want to emphasize this today, that in the 21st century, more than 1,000 years after he graced this earth, we can all think about this and how we practice and behave towards others who hold different either vows or tenets. He himself held the Mahasamgika vows, but he totally interacted with the Mool Sravastivadhan, which was the tradition in Tibet. Guru Sellingpa, his own most precious guru of Bodhicitta, is a Yogacharya mind-only school tenet holder. But Venerable Master Atisa held to the final view of emptiness of the Buddha as expounded by Arya Nagarjuna, Acharya Chandrakriti, Bodhisattva Shantideva, and others. Then he is cosmopolitan in going between India and Tibet at that time. And finally, he is a progressive modernizer, because though he goes to a degenerated Tibet where there are a lot of wrong views about Tantrayana, Vajrayana, and there's all this mixing up, he, as His Holiness said in his message today, was known as the cause and effect Lama, because that is what he showed openly and outwardly. So the Kadampa teachers say that, they say outwardly show your vows, inwardly hold to the teachings, Mahayana, Bodhicitta, and secretly practice the Vajrayana. I bow down to such a great being and look forward to this panel and 2 days of deliberation on the various facets of this great, great personage. And I'm so grateful to the organizers for this wonderful opportunity. So the rules of the house are 20 minutes per speaker, and then we'll have 10-15 minutes for Q&A. And over to invite Venerable Geshe Lhakdor.
मुझे कुछ नहीं हो गया आपको बोलना है
May I briefly introduce the speaker? Venerable Geshe Lhakdor was born in Yakra, Ngari, Western Tibet in 1956. He holds a Geshe, that is a Doctor of Divinity degree from Drepung Loseling Monastic University, an MPhil from the University of Delhi, and an MA in English from Punjab University, Chandigarh. A former translator and religious assistant to His Holiness the Dalai Lama for 16 years, he traveled extensively across 5 continents. He currently serves as director of the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, Dharamshala, and holds honorary professorships at the University of Delhi and the University of British Columbia. Geshe Lhakdor is also co-director of Science for Monks and a trustee of the Foundation for Universal Responsibility, contributing to global dialogues on ethics, education, and Buddhist philosophy. Please welcome Venerable Geshe Lhakdor.
Kange Tukzi Nyezone, Tawatamje Bambeche, Tambechune Dunjeba, Kodam de la Changselo, which can be loosely translated as one who, motivated by compassion, discarded all wrong views and taught the sublime teaching. I pay homage to Gautama the Buddha. This is my speech. I am already, Professor Shamsara and others know this very well, because when you become a senior person, whether you are useful or not useful, many people invite you all over the world. And these days they say, oh, first you come, please make sure you attend the conference. Then second they say, oh, send the abstract as soon as possible. Third, the whole paper as soon as possible. So right now I have like maybe 20 such requests. And I just returned from London yesterday, Fortunately, I don't have jet lag, but all I'm saying is as an excuse that I'm not prepared for this job. So I normally seize the opportunity to make life a little bit easier, a little bit laughing here and there, and so probably I'll end up doing that here also. But let me first cite this line from His Holiness Dalai Lama, who wrote a beautiful short article or book, kind of book, praising the 17 Nalanda scholars. So that means we have to organize many Guru conferences on all these 17 scholars. So out of which I'll recite this verse on Atisa. I call to mind Chobo Atisa, the kind Lord who caused the conqueror's teachings to flourish in the land of snow, who expounded in the paths of the three individuals the doctrine of the vast and profound, that are the complete teachings of the conqueror, the Buddha. And his lineage we call as Kadamba lineage. Kadamba basically means one who strictly follows the word of the teaching of the Buddha. The word of the teaching of the Buddha, as we say, is contained in the three sets of discourses, three Pitaka, which the Tibetan translation has 108 volumes. So I'm starting from this to say that unless we really dedicate our life and spend time to understand and study this, we will be nowhere. We will be nowhere. Look at the life history of Atisa himself. He scaled mountains and oceans and seas, approached more than 150 gurus with humility and humble from very young age. Of course, interestingly, he was a child prodigy. And it is as a result of this, he became one of the most eminent Buddhist scholars in India. I don't want to really tell the story, life story. They are all going to tell life story. Kaveri ji already told the life story. So as a senior person, I just wanted to say just a few words. One is the meaning of Kadamba. That means you should see all the teachings of the Buddha, each word, as something to be practiced. And it is the tradition of Kadamba to be externally pure, internally pure, and so forth, as you mentioned. So Kadamba, we call it Kadamba tradition, that tradition which possesses the feature of possessing 7 things. 7 things means the three Pitakas. The four deities. Buddha as the source of the teaching, Avalokiteshvara as the embodiment of compassion, and Tara as the source of success, energy, and Achala as the source of power, almost like Vajrapani. Kadam Lachu Dundin, we call it. So number one, I had no time to prepare for this and so forth. And then also, I was traveling, then I jot down a little bit here. I may or may not read this, but the important, first of all, I want to greet all of you, the organizers, especially the senior Indian scholars, experienced masters, for organizing this from the depth of my heart. I remember His Holiness Dalai Lama saying that India had exported so much of its tradition, hardly it is now dwindling and almost left nothing. This is not true to our Indian brothers and sisters, also true in the case of the Tibetans. So many Tibetan books have been translated into English by the non-Buddhist scholars, the Western scholars and so forth. But what are we importing in lieu of that export? The material aspect. This is for me almost like question of survival of our culture and our tradition. Now elderly senior people like you have that experience and taste of how important the Indian tradition, Indian culture is. But do the young generation have the same feeling? I am afraid to say no. And in a challenging note, I would even say, do we have an institute where the real study is rigorously made, especially for lay people? I have a big question. कहने के लिए तो है, इधर उधर भी पढ़ाई हो रहा है, उधर भी हो रहा है, लेकिन when we talk about preserving a vast and profound tradition, you need dedicated course, dedicated people, dedicated support. And I have been telling in almost all my talks, especially to our Indian brothers and sisters, that India's real greatness must be shown in its soft power, not in its hard power, the power of military, army. Of course, you need this because unfortunately you may not have very friendly neighbors. So you have every right to defend yourself. Tibetans were so naive, we could not defend. We have religion, but we could not defend. So that aspect also you need. But the real greatness of India is its soft power, its culture, its logic, its reason, its mind training, which is taught by Atisa. So therefore, without trying to go into the actual life history, which many will narrate, I was thinking, what are some of the features that Atisa left, which we should emulate? One is this very special feature of goodness, that you should be a good person. Very simple message, but he is saying good person. And the first verse that he wrote in this lamp for the path to enlightenment is Tuzum Java Sanjit Karina Thamji Dang, Gindu Namla Kubachimbo shouted, Loma Sangbo Chanchu Viji Kuchuves, Chanchu Labji Namarab the Hebrew. So basically he was saying that by paying homage to all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and similarly paying homage to the Dharma and the Sangha, as is requested to me by the good student, Changchu, the Tibetan student, good student. And the Changchu was called as good student by Atisa because this Tibetan master Changchu, interestingly, he is also from my province, Kuki, Ngari. So Atisa spent many years there, so I have special affinity. So this good student Changchu, he requested Atisa by saying that we don't need very profound, difficult to understand teaching, but please give a teaching which Tibetans can understand, which Tibetans can implement. And in fact, when the two translators were requesting Atisa to come to Tibet several times, he said, I'm busy man. He did not accept it rightly, just like the Buddha. When Buddha, after enlightenment, he was requested to give the teaching, he said, what I found is very profound, very vast. You people will not be able to understand. Just do your work. Let me do my meditation. And he was saying this because what he really found was profound and vast. It needs seriousness to understand it, not just reading few books and give a talk, not like that. So Atisa was also saying the same thing. I'm busy, I have no time. And then also he said, at one point he said, if I come to Tibet, for example, he said there may be two reasons for me to come there. One, gold. You Tibetans are giving a lot of gold to our Indian teachers coming there. So that is, because many teachers before him, they went there for gold and spread wrong teachings and made Tantra and Sutra as, completely contradictory, like heat and cold. So he knew all this. So one reason is to go to Tibet to get gold, but I'm not the Lama looking for gold. Second is to teach bodhicitta, the altruistic mind to enlightenment, which I don't have. See, the humility. If he doesn't have this knowledge, who else has this? But he says, like his holiness, he says, no, I know nothing. This is the humility. So in plain words, we should really not only just delve on the past, what he did, he was great, okay, that's okay, very good, but what is it that we should inherit? What is it that we should learn? Humility, goodness. In today's world, I travel almost over 30 countries, where in many countries you see corruption is rampant, exploitation is rampant, bribery is rampant. With this kind of way of life where there's no moral ethics, how are you going to make your country great? बोलने के लिए बहुत आसान है. मैं यहाँ से चांद पर आपको रख दूंगा, बोल सकता हम लोग. Really, I feel very concerned for my own Tibetan people. Of course, we live in exile, and I'm equally concerned with our Indian brothers and sisters, because he always says, we are your chela, you are our guru. And he sometimes jokingly, in a teaching, he says, now it looks like chela has more knowledge than the guru, because Buddhism disappeared more or less from this country. I feel very sad. I travel to many countries, and then when I look at India, I see two very important features that Indians have. Intelligence. Indians are very intelligent. Then natural resources for the development of country. You have almost everything. फिर भी इतना जितना होना चाहिए नहीं हो रहा है. क्यों? करप्शन है, ब्राइबरी है, लगन से काम नहीं कर रहा. I will end up criticizing. I don't like this. I hate this. But घर में मैं बोलता हूँ, बाहर में नहीं बोलता है. बाहर में आपका जब चर्चा करता हूँ, आपका प्रशंसा करता हूँ, अंदर में बोलते हैं ये क्या कर रहे हैं आप लोग यहाँ सड़क टूट रहा है, आप इतना भी नहीं बना सकते, फिर क्या बोलेंगे आप, क्या करेंगे? Really? So that's why I was so kind of happy that Shyam Saranji, International Center, Arunji, and all these people working for so many years. I had the privilege of attending the first Guru conference also. I was one of the collaborators. And then these things are not easy, You need a lot of work and expenses, so many things. We need to acknowledge all these things. Despite of all these problems, you saw the importance of this. You are not organizing this for the sake of counting Isniya. I believe you are not doing this. So I am very grateful to you, because unless we preserve our own unique ancient Indian tradition, which is tradition of logic and ethics. If you look at the Indian tradition, it's really the religion also. If you look at it, it's a religion of dialogue, religion of plurality, right? So we must at all cost try to preserve this, to make India excel and to be a great contributor in the civilization of the world. Right? So that's one thing that I wanted to say. The second thing is, Atisa is the best example of the relation between India and Tibet. In many of my talks, sometimes, especially when I talk to the younger generation, I tell them that, Buddha is not Tibetan, he's Indian. And with the passage of time, Tibetans have started thinking Buddha is Tibetan. People who don't study, because we hear so much about Buddha is Tibetan. And our Indian young people, they don't know Buddha is Indian. So I need to, Buddha is in India. And today there's so much interest all over, including the scientists. There's so much interest about Buddha's teaching, Nagarjuna's teaching, Chandrakirti's teaching. लेकिन हमारे यहाँ जितना होना चाहिए नहीं हो रहा है. Maybe I don't know everything, maybe happening somewhere. Especially younger generation. So therefore, with this kind of collaboration between Tibetan scholars and Indian scholars, we are strengthening our spiritual connection. The importance of Tibetan in Indian connection is, it is not a political connection. There may be a little bit, but not political connection. It's not economic connection. It is spiritual connection for thousands of years. I'm not saying this because I'm here. You see, Tibetans, many young, shining students, they lost their kind of life when they took the journey to come to India, study, translate. Sometimes 25 students go and only 2 manage to leave. Many stories like that. इतना मेहनत करके यहाँ के जो धर्म है उन्होंने तिब्बत में लेके आया था. So Tibetans preserved it. Now again, because of this tragedy that has happened in Tibet, again we are in your country, in your home, and you are giving us the space and the protection, the freedom to practice it. So we are very grateful. Together, we are making this amazing, spiritual tradition survive in this world. So that is the task of खत्म हो गया. मुझे जरूरत से ज़्यादा यहाँ बैठने का कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं. Okay. Then as somebody mentioned that this Lamrim, the stages of path teaching, if I just mention 1 or 2 words. We have texts like called stages of the spiritual path to enlightenment, stages of meditation. That means in terms of your spiritual development, there is no push button enlightenment, there is no shortcut. Stages में जाना पड़ता है. Even when you cook a food, if you are a good cook, you can't throw everything into the pot at one go. It's maybe sequence होता है. Even when we use lift these days, still एकदम से नहीं पहुंचता है, धीरे धीरे करके जाना पड़ता है. So stages of meditation. So therefore the text that he wrote is a complete path. And I had the privilege of receiving this transmission from His Holiness and some other texts by Atisa. And I myself also, occasionally try to teach these things. So these are amazing. These are amazing. So now from this conference, sometimes we have a great conference, then after that nothing. 4 दिन की चांदनी फिर अंधेरी रात. वो नहीं होना चाहिए, really. So this endeavor to preserve this great spiritual heritage is not just for you and for me, for our younger generation, for humanity. If you travel around the world, बाहर का जो चमकते हुए चीजें देखने के लिए बहुत मिलता है. Now artificial intelligence will come, all these things will come. But based on my layman's understanding, unless the human being who exploits all these natural resources, all these technological aspects, if the human being itself is unethical, manipulative, the world is moving into a very dangerous trend. We need to know this. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Venerable Geshe Lhakdor for a fantastic and so much knowledge. So there's people like you who don't need to prepare because it's all in the mind and practice. Our next speaker is Venerable Dr. Pooja Dabral. She's an assistant professor at the School of Buddhist Studies, Philosophy and Comparative Religion and the School of Language, Literature and Philosophy at Nalanda University. She earned her PhD from the University of Delhi for her thesis Arya Nagarjuna's Philosophy of Emptiness and Tsongkhapa's exposition, Descent in Two Prolific Periods. Her teaching and research focus is on Madhyamika philosophy, Buddhist psychology and the Mahayana tradition. A long-term student of Tibetan House, Delhi, she has published and presented widely on Buddhist philosophy, mind and matter, and Nalanda legacies. Proficient in Tibetan and German, she received the International Outstanding Women in Buddhism Award in 2024 in Taiwan. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Can we have the slides, please? Thank you very much, Venerable Professor Kaveri, a dear friend and a senior in every aspect, and also now in legacies that Buddha has left and Nalanda masters have disseminated. To start with, let me continue with the words that Geshe Lhakdor has said in Tibetan, and in Sanskrit it goes like this: Sarva drishti prahanai yah sa dharmam deshayat anukampam upadayetam namasyami gautamam. So this is the actually verse from Arya Nagarjuna's text Mool Madhyamika Karika, where he summarizes the whole endeavor of Nalanda University, Vikramashila University, Udantapura University, and Takshila is to proliferate the teachings of the wisdom that Buddha imparted in Rajgir in Vulture's Peak. also known as Pragyaparamita Sutras. Let me also thank Shri Shyam Saranji for giving me this opportunity. Yesterday I think 2 days before, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Sachin Chaturvedi ji, sent me a codal invite that we have received from Shyam Saranji. And I mentioned that I'm speaking on the first panel, and he was very, very pleasantly surprised, and also said that make sure that you make most of their presence and learn a lot from there while you are sharing what we do at Nalanda. So thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful opportunity. Kian Shrivastava ji and many great seniors are here. I cannot name everybody, but please, huge regard to everyone. Geshe Lhakdor, I have great, great regard and learned a lot. And of course, as a student while learning Buddhist philosophy at Tibet House and Delhi University, so much help has been extended from Geshe Lhakdor when it comes to Library of Tibetan Archives. And also our dear friend Geshe Thabkhe, who will be speaking after me, but he should be speaking before me because he has many insight when it comes to his legacy in Tibet. So I'll quickly run through the slides, as organizers have already intimated us that we should be finishing in 15 minutes. So the topic that I chose is the Master Atisa Dipankara Shirigyana, Life Legacy and Enduring Global Influence. Why I added the word enduring global influence? I come from an international university, Nalanda University, which has a mandate or partnership with 17 countries. And while we are partnering with 17 countries, we have MOUs with many more countries. Recently visited Korea, Mongolia, and now to Indonesia, and exploring the Nalanda Master's contribution. Here today we are, as Geshe Lhakdor has now given us the responsibility to take the legacies of these great Nalanda Master. Today we are confining to Atisa Dipankara Shirigyana, but at Nalanda, with the Nalanda University Press, Common Archival Research Center, sir, I'm very, very pleased to inform you that as our Shri Shekhavaji in the morning, Honorable Union Minister has said, Jnana Bharatam mission, we are aligning with it, not only collecting the manuscripts of Nalanda Masters, but also doing the value addition to it, like translation, and metadata collection through Nalanda AI, as well as annotation of the short commentaries on their text. I have been given the responsibility by Vice Chancellor to first compile the work of R.N. Nagarjuna and do the value addition. So, sir, we are trying our best to take the legacy forward. So, coming back to the topic now, Lama Atisa Dipankara Shirigyana, also known as George Atisa. Now we know, I would skip the technical historical accounts. He was born in 11th century, a great master associated with Vikramashila, Udantapuri, as well as Nalanda University. His name, Dipankara Shirigyana, means one whose deep awareness acts as a lamp. Early life and education, he was born in a royal family, and three sons, and he was the middle of them, and a child prodigy. At the age of 21, he had already mastered 64 forms of sports, art, crafts, grammar, literature, and philosophy. And as we know, I'll just quickly share after that, the Paravidyas and the Aparavidyas, which was the tradition in Bharatiya Shastra Parampara, has been mastered by this master in 11th century. Extensive study he did in 12 years at Udantapuri under Guru Dharmarakshita, and practice of Mahayana Vajrayana, where the yogi Rahul Gupta advised and guided him in this Vajrayana practices. Many accounts are there. I have relied on the Tibetan and the Chinese accounts. And of course, when it comes to great Nalanda masters, there are contested views, especially their birth years and the places that they visited. But it is not the reason for us to stop. More research is required, and also we need to go deeper into the legacy that they have left, as Geshe Lhakdor said, what they actually said in terms of their views. I will take you to the global impact of his views. As I said, I come from an international university, and I'm very, very happy to share that more than we sharing with students, sometimes they tell us that, ma'am, in Sri Lanka, we have a Atisa Center of Study. And then Indonesia, in Jambi University, we just had a conference, and they mentioned a lot about how they revere this master, Lama Atisa, George Atisa, and have many institutions in his name. And then, of course, he traveled to, as you know, we learned from other speakers now, that he actually traveled to Sumatra and spent 12 years learning from the master, in Sanskrit known as Dharmakirti and in Tibetan known as Lama Serlingpa. What is Serlingpa? Is a golden island, master from Golden Island. And there are master by the name Dharmakirti in 17 Nalanda masters also, but it is the different master in Indonesia. And Lama Atisa or Master Atisa has a huge regard when it comes to this master, although his own philosophy is Madhyamaka philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. Those who are researching and studying Buddhist philosophy, they know there are different schools, and Lama Atisa or Master Atisa holds the higher philosophical position of emptiness, shunyata, as taught by R.N. Nagarjuna. But when it comes to bodhicitta practice, he has a huge regard, and he said his most cherished teacher is the teacher of Lama Serlingpa or Dharmakirti from Indonesia. It is because this is the spirit that guided all other practices and views that he shared with the world. And then coming to the Tibet, in the latest stage of his life, he was invited, as Geshe Lhakdor already mentioned, he was invited by Tibetan people with even at the sacrifice of their life. The uncle, Geshe, he sacrificed his life, and still the nephew continued the journey to invite Master Atisa. And the two questions he asked them, that only somebody goes there is for gold, or if there is a need for a teacher to go. And I see there is nothing that I can contribute here, as you already have great teacher when it comes to bodhicitta practice, means universal compassion. And also I'm not interested in gold, so why should I go there? He had a great deliberation with the delegates that have visited from Tibet, and found out that when it comes to Madhyamika view, there still is a need for him to go and clarify many profound realities, and that motivated him to go to Tibet even at the cost of his life. And it so happened that upon his return, I'm sure Geshe Thabkhe will share that he was supposed to come back, but he could not because of the war that has been was there in the neighboring countries, and he stayed there. And as a gift to the Indian people, he wrote the text Bodhipath Pradeep, a lamp for the path to enlightenment, and was sent to India. And this text became the pioneer text when it comes to practice of the 3 years retreat in many traditions across the world, especially in Mongolia, Southeast Asian country, in Tibet, and also now in India, in the Himalayan part of India, like Sikkim. And also you go to Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, you see people going into the retreat of 3 months, 3 years, or sometime 3 days on the basis of Bodhipath Pradeep as taught by Lama Atisa. I already explained the connection with Indonesia. He spent 12 years in Indonesia under the guidance of Lama Serlingpa. And what did he learn there is the bodhicitta practice. And just one very interesting thing is that actually this bodhicitta practice was taught by Buddha Shakyamuni in multiple sutras, like Suvarna Prabha Sutra, Gold Sutra, and Sadharma Pundrika Sutra, Heart Sutra. But this bodhicitta practice was spread by the great masters of India, like Arya Sangha, Arya Nagarjuna, Acharya Aryadev, Acharya Vasubandhu, Bodhisattva Shantideva. They all wrote about this bodhicitta, which simply means universal love and compassion, how to expand your love and compassion, not confining to your family, society, but the entire sentient beings. And this practice he learned in Indonesia from his Lama Serlingpa. So Lama Serlingpa actually becomes the confluence of the different practices that were taught by Buddha Shakyamuni on bodhicitta. And from him he got this practice of bodhicitta, which is spread to Tibet. And from Tibet it went to Mongolia, Russia, and now in Himalayan part of India we have it back. These are the practices. I may not go here, but it's very fruitful to read through the practices whenever you have time, because just the word bodhicitta may not make too much sense to us. But what is this practice is the equalizing self and other, reflecting on the demerits of oneself and merits of cherishing others, actual exchange of self and other, and finally going to the altruistic, proactive working for the society through the practice of bodhicitta and wisdom. Then his contribution to Tibet, I have already narrated. Great sacrifice has been done by Tibetan people to invite him and let him clarify the views, particularly, as many have mentioned, in those times, monasticism, the monastic vows have been seen in contradiction with the Tantrayana Mahayana. So first, for one clarification, there is no separate Mahayana or Tantrayana. It is the branch, it is the part of Mahayana practice, a practice where you wish to become enlightened for the benefit of all sentient beings. So now you want to become enlightened very slowly, or you want to expedite the path. If you want to expedite the path, tantric techniques are being utilized. So Tantrayana is not a separate branch, it is the part of Mahayana teachings. So now within the Mahayana there are Sutrayana and Mahayana. So Tantrayana teachings, which come under part of the Mahayana teaching, he clarified that there is no contradiction when it comes to monastic vows and the Tantra, Mahayana Tantra practice. In fact, he mentioned in this book that has been so kindly circulated by the organizer, Bodhipat Pradeep, that the individual liberation vows, the monastic vows, is the foundation for Bodhisattva vows, and Bodhisattva vows is the in turn foundation for the Tantrayana vows. So in other words, for the tantric practices, these vows are extremely indispensably required. Now, his major contribution to Paravidyas and Aparavidyas, why I have taken you here, because in the ancient Nalanda, as we know, they were the study of the 5 major sciences and the minor sciences, like the Shilpa Vidya, Pramana Vidya, Shabda Vidya, Chikitsa Vidya, and Adhyatma Vidya. So when we see Acharya Atisha's contribution is mainly to the Aparavidyas. And why do we have these Aparavidyas? As Arya Sanga's Bodhisattva Bhumi mentioned very clearly, anybody who says that I'm following a Mahayana path, I'm following a Bodhisattva path, they should be trained in the Panch Mahavidyas. While they are training in the inner science, spiritual science, they should equally be taking part and understanding the logic, grammar, language, and the Shilpa Vidya and medicine. And of course, time doesn't allow, but there are rationale given. Why? Because in those times, the yogis, while they are into spiritual practice, they travel through the forest and they go to the caves and they teach other people, and the medical facilities are not right at the corner. So they have to be their own doctor. They have to help others while they're traveling. So medicine was very important. Likewise, language. Without language, how can you even make people understand the depth of the philosophy? And just as the mathematics is the backbone for physics, the logic is the backbone. Shastrarth was always the backbone for all Indian philosophical traditions. So Nalanda was not untouched by it. Even all Nalanda masters learned the art of Hetu Vidya, logic, to go into the rigor of philosophical expositions. Iconographic representation, I would definitely like to, because many people nowadays, they go into the exhibition is being displayed here, and many people go into the iconographic representation of these masters. The first thing that I would like to clarify here, all this iconographic representation that came into existence over a period of time, from 5th century AD to 11th century AD, these were not just random representations. They have a huge impact when it comes to the practice of Buddhist practitioners. When they visualize, especially in the Guru deity yogas, when they visualize their master as Lama Atisha, they try to visualize all the iconographic representations. What are the, for example, he's sitting in a lotus posture. Then he is in the Dharma Chakra Pavartan Mudra, where Buddha taught that, he taught Dharma Chakra, or the first time went to Saranath, he is depicted in the Dharma Chakra Pavartan Mudra, turning the wheel of Dharma. And then also the lotus, symbolizing the wisdom, the scripture symbolizing the pragya, and then many other aspects of iconographic representation are extremely important when it comes to applied philosophical practice of these traditions. These are the books. Okay, so the great repository that we had at Nalanda, and then this repository, as somebody mentioned, there were millions of texts as Taranatha's account goes, and then these were the major texts that were contributed by Acharya Atisha. Bodhipat Pradeep is shining jewel, and besides that there is Satya Dvai Avatara. Why I'm mentioning this? Because this is the text that he wrote. It's called Entry into the True Truths. This is the text he wrote at the request of Indonesian king. So this cultural diplomacy and also the influence of the foreign masters and the request of the kings of Indonesia is shown in the Indian master's text. In one of the words, he clearly mentions that at the request of the Indonesian king, I comprise it and also gift it to the monasteries in India. Then the Bodhipat Pradeep, extremely brilliant text, which has designed the entire practice on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Just 2 minutes, please. And then India's, now what I really like to place Acharya Atisha, which I think the next conference and some sessions after this first session can take up, is the Acharya Atisha is very special because he comes at the time of the decline of Nalanda University, when Nalanda University was declining. So the text that he actually wrote in Tibet, called Bodhipat Pradeep, and gifted and sent it to India for Indian masters to feel that Acharya Atisha, although he cannot return to India, but he's still there in Indian spirit, in Nalanda spirit. He actually distilled, synthesized all the views of great Indian Nalanda masters. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama has mentioned 17, but doesn't mean he just, it means that in the Tibetan tradition, 17 are studied very, very rigorously as primary masters, and then they go into the secondary masters also, where the contribution is required. Whereas at time, as we know, Xuanzang has mentioned, at the peak of Nalanda there were 10,000 students and more than 2,000 masters. And then there is and at Nalanda University we are trying to at least collate the work of 326 masters, come up with the statues of them around our library. So this is the contribution that of Nalanda and Vikramasila has done at one time. And Acharya Atisha's text is very special because all those 67 verses in this text distill the synthesis of the views of these great masters. Just to quickly, for all this text, so this is the library that we are coming up with. On the basis of ancient Nalanda, Dharmaganja, it was called Dharmaganja in those times, and it has three main stories. The Jnana Bharata mission, alignment with that, we have CARC project, collating the manuscripts of these great Nalanda masters. And then in this text of just to quickly summarize, in this text of Bodhipat Pradim, you see Arya Nagarjuna's Shunyata view is being distilled. And also Arya Sanga's philosophy of psychology of mind is being discussed. And then Acharya Dharmakirti's logic was discussed in Acharya Atisha's text. And also finally, when we go to the Vajrabodhi and Mogha Vajra, who the master who made major contribution to China and Sri Lanka, their Vajrayana practices were also distilled as a part of the Bodhipat Pradeep. So if somebody goes into the research of this text, even Bodhipat Pradeep, it is very much required to study other masters and how they have contributed to different areas like epistemology, psychology, tantra, and logic, and also the language when it's study of the Buddhism. And then all it is inspired, as I show it is the place my university is, Rajgir. And on this vulture sprig, Buddha Shakyamuni taught Pragyaparamita Sutras, where all these views which are distilled in this Bodhipat Pradeep are being taught by Buddha Shakyamuni. So this is the bibliography, if somebody is interested. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Venerable Dr. Pooja Dabral, who's done a masterful and speedy presentation. Just to share with all that the Nalanda masters that are counted are those whose texts were actually taught and studied in Nalanda, and there are many others like the great Jesu Naropa and others who are not technically counted for this reason. So I think you've done a masterful job of bringing all of that in one short presentation. Our next speaker is Geshe Thabkhe, and he is a scholar monk of Sera Monastic University, which he joined in 1997. After over 2 decades of intensive study in Buddhist philosophy, dialectics, and monastic discipline, he earned the Geshe Larampa degree, the highest academic title in the Tibetan tradition, the distinguished doctoral degree. He's also studied science at Emory University from 2010 to 2013 and researched brain imaging at Northwestern University in 2023. Since 2022, as director of Sera Modern Education, he has integrated modern science and Buddhist scholarship within the monastic curriculum. Over to you, Geshe.
Thank you very much. Okay, Sanje Chodan Zoji Chonam La Chanjo Bardo Dane Japsu Che Tage Chinso Jibe Tonam Dola Benje Sanje to Show. So this is very kind of like we believe composed by Atisa, which is almost every Tibetans now and they recite every kind of things doing even this mornings. I memorized it's a very young age, although I don't know the meaning. Although I don't know the meaning in early age, but the Rebbe says, until I'm enlightened, I take refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. Through the merit I create by practicing giving other professional, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of sentient beings. So this is very, very, I would say it's kind of like a concise summaries all of 80,000 Buddhist volumes. So that's why one of the, I think before I should to the greet to all of, distinguish to the masters, things. So I basically agree to those great who have done to the greetings. So, and for the sake of time, I apologize don't to mention anything. So I'm going to forward that. So one of thing is, I cannot go every details. I think I will go to the two or couple things to say about life of Lama Atisas. We don't need to go. Actually, my colleagues, Venerable, did both great jobs. So nothing too much left to say except few words I really like to say. So one of thing is why Atisha and very important, and especially in the modern time. So one of thing is, as I mentioned, in Tibetan, how much influence you can represent what I recite to the few words, which is mainly two things, about refugee and bodhicitta. Refugee makes you to become Buddhist. So doesn't mean to you are born in Buddhist family, that doesn't make you to Buddhist until you take seriously refuge to the Buddha Dharma Sangha. That's make you to refuge. But doesn't mean to you are born in the culture of Mahayana, doesn't make you to Mahayana traditions, except you practice for the bodhicitta or compassion. And that's the two things to Atisha confess to all the 80,000 Buddhist teachings, right? So here I am like kind of, it's a very fortunate too, I feel like, because to me it's I'm really grateful to invite me to here, although I have nothing much to say about it. But one thing is myself is since childhood, since I remember, I can recite some of the words composed by Atisha. Not only me, it's a whole of my family in the regions, most of the Tibetans. So other thing is the year of compassion that we are celebrating to the 90th birthday of His Holiness Dalai Lama, which is we believe the manifestation of our Lokiteshvara, or it's a representative of compassion or bodhicitta, which is main teaching by Atisha. Okay. So here's two things I want to say were relevant to the modern society. As you read, here's the wonderful word by composed Atishas, with the mindfulness, vigilant, and conscientious, constantly guard to the gateway of your senses again and again, 3 times both day and night, examine the follow up your thought. So it's a wonderful, you see modern time. And my colleagues, the Venerable Pooja, covered out of Atisha's name of teachings centers all over the world. But I would like to say there's more than, without saying Atishas, but people take seriously their teaching, like mindfulness, vigilance, conscientious. You can see how much people, hubs and are passionate about practicing mindfulness in the last couple of decades. Now the people coming to that's not enough. We need to compassion, which is the heart of the practice of the bodhicitta. There's a lot of program coming, and one of the His Holiness under the His Holiness and Geshe Lhakdor and Geshe Lobsang great contribution for the sea learnings to the education, which is compassion-based education toward the modern society. This morning, Geshe Lhakdor, very seriously request to you all have it. You can see here's the couple things: bodhicitta, compassion, mind training. If you go to the Lojong tradition, all comes from basis for the Atisha. So a couple of words to see: put all blame on the ego. Use every moment to open your heart. Turn suffering into path. Compassion is the highest practice. So see how powerful. So one of the best skill I found in Atisha is very, very essence, without long text. Just essence, very simple word can take into That's the one of the great skill. And other skill I found is why Atisa has become a great teacher, because he can do all the great philosophy, make very easy, very simple way. Like when I'm learning to the science, Newton and Galileo is why successful, because they make very implicable to the science knowledges that Greek has, lots of philosophy, lots of, checking to the astronomy things, take to the ground level, to experiment, to can do something. That's the same thing Atisa did, great philosophy, like Nalanda masters. He can be practical way, simple way, to durable way, like that. And the other things I would like to call here again and again, and His Holiness is say, love and compassion are necessity, not luxury. Without them, humanity cannot survive. It's true, because of the way we need Atisa's teaching, because we need to compassion. This is not for the rituals, it's for the survival. It's for the good for human being, good for society, good for the family. That's I would like to share. So here's the, I don't need to recalling. And also, here's the one thing I mentioned, I would like to mention. I'm not a historian, but you see, Tibetan, we usually call when we're talking about the teachers and the student relationship, we used to give even though you have 157 teachers, but you can respect all of them. That's good example for Atisa. But I little bit doubt here. So some text says only 12 direct route teachers and 34, 157 is hard to count. But sometimes if you look at the text, they count all the lineage teachers, which is even without not his time. Maybe there's some, the scholar can argue because he received directly teaching manifested way or dream or whatever. So that's just kind of things. But every time when Atisa talking about it, he put the most respect to the Lama Selingpa or Dharmakirti, because he received bodhicitta or compassion from him. Every time calling the name, that he was do this, and then that's because of received that compassion teaching. So how much put the compassion teaching make Atisa valuable? Okay. So then Atisa become monks. Probably I don't have a time. I don't want to talk about that. And one of thing is unique things. Like maybe if you are non-Tibetans, a little bit wondering about, Atisa came to Tibet, and reviving all the nearly centuries decline of Tibetan, Buddhism. But he never ordained to the monks and the bhikkhus, because he's the different traditions. So this is interesting, and also sometimes he was a little bit annoying. Some point I would like to, what is the the normal, like if here our kind of normal people appear to what the Atisa's kind of like attitude or behavior looks like. Sometimes he shows a little bit kind of like easy to upset, sort of that. There's a kind of story, one of the very famous, he's like a translator, or called the Nakso Lotsawa, and at some point he pull out his ink, and then he just immediately throw away to and lock the door. So says, and out of the Nakso calling, you did that again too when I was in Ngari, and you did today again. And then Atisa says, oh, you are a great translator. You still keeping grudge to me. The Atisa is kind of like, usually Tibetan, it's a kind of like a narrative we're saying like, I can upset but without hold it. So Toa yu jang zimba me. So you should be that like, but you have a little hold because you remember I forget about what I did in Ngari, but you still keep in that hold. What is good for us is in a human beings, we usually get upset, right? But don't be hold. It's not good for you and not good for the family, right? Or anybody. So that is, I think, is good for learning. So and then of course the reason he came to Tibet, I'm just following that to the Pooja's talk. So the Tibetan already mentioned who was inviting, why the reason, but I would like to hear the two kind of like a brother and nephew. The Lama Yeshe and the Changju is very, very important in Tibetan Buddhism to revival. So some scholars put 3 great legacy for those brothers. One is teaching of the Buddha spirit in the Ngari region eventually goes to back, because they wanted to restore what we have during the 7th century, 8th century, great king, you know, the Pema Sambawa and the great king Tesson Desen, all these legacies you will see, and also restoring Vinaya traditions. That's called we call the Tundul. And another thing is the second most legacy is inviting Atisa to the Tibet. And then third is the, you know, that the foster many translators, including great translator Rinje Sangbo, and many to the train to the translators and retranslate and reviewing many texts. That way we kept a lot. And here's the Drom Dumba. He says about to the Atisa, great scholar, if you had not come to Tibet, there would be the teaching of Buddha, but most would have been deluded about profound meaning. So I prostrate to you to taught well. So this is a kind of summarize. There's a lot of reasons already mentioned why Atisa come to Tibet, because there's a lot of mixing to the kind of, you know, Tandrayana or not Tandrayana. So it's people don't know. And Tibetan is at that time, people like following to somebody says, here's the great teaching, here's the great mysticals, and I have a great secret Tantra, I have a great yogi, all these things. People, but they don't. So that when Atisa came, he realized people don't have a foundations, which is really need to be refugee and the law of understanding of cause effect. So he realized. And also Geshe Lhakdor already mentioned the way of the good student of the Changju, because he requests we need to symbol, we need to foundation. So the Atisa taught all the time to the very foundation level. So some point I feel like, you know, he's great master in India, like modern time, and the great professor in the university, and come to taught is kindergarten level. That's not easy, because the professor always easily to goes to their, you know, they're kind of like liars. So, but Atisa all the way down to 2. And that's one of the good thing is people easily understood what he talking about. So he got name to the, you know, Lama karmic cause and effect. Lama Landepa, Tibetan called. He got named that when he was in Ngari. Okay, let me show a little bit about. There's a great, if you learning, there's one of the scholars who wrote about the Kadamba history about the legend Kunga Jensen. He no, I'm not talking about this. Okay, maybe later. I'm probably going to talk this one. So he says about 108 wonder deed of Lord Atisa. So if you're interested, you can look through that. So I'm coming back to here. I'm going to a little bit talk about to Tibet, especially people Tibetans. You can like little bit map out how Atisa travel to beginning to travel to the Nepal, to then Ngari, and then all the days. So one of the unique things is he went to the monastery called. Oh, only 2 minutes. I would like to tell to the monastery called the Toling, which is Ngari. Have you heard to the monastery called the Samye? Eventually he traveled there too. And you see how this, King Changju and Yeshe have a spirit to restore exactly happened during the 7th century and 8th century. You can, basically you can learn to this monastery to have a red and then white and then 4 these stupas around, and then start to training to the scholars like translators. All these things, same thing happened to the before the 7th, 8th century in Tibet. They just back to restore. So that thing is. Since 2 minutes, I would like to show one last thing. Why Atisa becomes so successful in Tibet? Obviously, I mentioned his way of teaching or organizing to how to understand to the peoples. But the other thing is also king's support. But even more, I think, is grateful is his great disabled Dromdumba called the Upasika, which is, the Tara already, proficiency that you would be made to the grade, the student of Dromdumba. Here's the great powerful picture. If you see this picture, to me, it's kind of like two ways. One way is like representative of the modern time. We do multitask, like you're watching cell phone and then listening to others and eating, something like that. But the other things, this is a representative of how he is hardworking. Look at the 4 things to do at the same time. He's doing like making to the tsamba on the hand, and underneath he's making soft leather to used to be like this way in the traditional ways. And the behind side, you can see the reading text, memorizing text, studying. He was under his teacher called the Lama Sejun in Kham region. So, and then behind they have some sort of like kind of like in the Tibetan, I don't know the name, they put into the milk and then shaking, so eventually you can come out to the butter. So 4 things together. So that's a representative of how hard work is. Even though that work is, but he's still reading, memorizing, studying. So this is we need to be hard work. Obviously, we all have so many duties, but we have to try to best as much as possible, like Dromdamba did. So that's why he got such that kind of people who dedicate and who respect to you. That's why he becomes so successful. So I will maybe conclude here. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So thank you so much to Geshe Thabkhe. I want to say that I said at the beginning the common biography is so extraordinary of this person in 72 years. And also at a time, look at the cosmopolitanism, because one thing that Geshe has brought out is that not attributing things to Joboje, Palden, Atisa, but that are spread across the world, like the refuge verse and all these mindfulness practices and everything. And going back to what Venerable Geshe Lhakdor said right at the start, I think in India we need to think about this, because nowadays a lot of modern gurus do not mention lineage at all. It's like they are self-arisen Rangjung gurus. So here is great. So thank you for a wonderful panel. And we'll take maybe 2 questions. If you could direct it to the particular speaker and keep it brief. Thank you so much. Mike.
You spoke about the fact that he's so important in India and Tibet, and of course in Mongolia. But can we hear a little bit about his role in Mongolia, because he's only next to Gautama the Buddha there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So this is actually So Mongolia, not only Mongolia, as I mentioned, in Central Asia. So Mongolia, why I mentioned, because recently in Mongolia, of course, his views were always there, because the Mongolia inherited Tibetan, the Buddhism from Tibet. So it went from Tibet, so all the legacies of Nalanda masters, particularly Acharya Atishas, are quite vibrant there. And also now in Mongolia, in one of the monasteries, in one of the temple, they have erected all the 70 Nalanda masters statue. So because I was doing some research, and I think the only place where we have all these masters statues now is that temple in Mongolia. And apart from that, I was so happy to go to Ganden Monastery in again a Gelug center in Mongolia, where the students, they go into the study of these texts of masters, and Acharya Atisha, Arenagarjuna, Acharya Chandrakirti, all of them learning Sanskrit. So there was a teacher or a Acharya from Sarnath University teaching them Sanskrit, and they also learn Tibetan. So these are the 2 basic languages they learn first before they go into the analysis of those texts in their philosophy studies. Apart from there, they are also going into the iconography and art. So since we have an MOU with them, we are planning to have an MOU with them. So these were my direct experience, apart from what I studied in the text, that how Mongolia has cherished all these teachings of Nalanda masters because of having traveled via Tibet to Mongolia.
Yeah, and just to add to that, ma'am, that Bakula Rinpoche was seen as one of the 16 great arhats. And Bakula Rinpoche, who's from Ladakh, and we know his history, but he studied in Tibet. So that's a direct influence coming down again from Joje Pardon Atisha. Next question, please. If there are no more questions, then a huge round of applause for this wonderful panel. Thank you so much.